What's up, everybody? Today I'm here to talk about the best books that I read this year in 2023. After a little bit of a heated video talking about the worst books that I read, it's time for something a little bit more positive, talking about my favorite books I read this year. And it just so happened that pretty much all of my favorite books that I read this year are children's books, which I do read a lot of those, but yeah, I don't know, I guess I didn't have a good reading year as far as adult horror books go. I didn't really have many of those that really surprised me are ones that I ended up loving. I do have a couple of honorable mentions that I want to talk about that are both adult horror books, and the reason I didn't include them in like my top favorite reads of the year is because they're both rereads, books that I've read before, so I didn't really feel like it would be fair to like put them in my top spot because they're books I already knew I liked and I've read before. But I did want to just kind of mention them and bring them up a little bit. So the first one I'm going to talk about, I actually couldn't find my copy of it. I'm not sure where it's at. But the first book I'm going to be talking about is Stephen King's Night Shift. And this book is one I've actually read 3 times now. This is one of my all-time favorite short story collections. This is my favorite Stephen King book. I believe there's a total of 17 stories in here. And I like the majority of them. There's only 3, maybe 4 stories in here, if I remember right, that I'm not a big fan of. A couple of them I don't really care for all that much. But that's a pretty good ratio out of 17 stories to only have like 3 or 4 kind of meh or bad ones. That's pretty good. And some of my favorite stories in this collection are like some of my favorite short stories of all time. You have Jerusalem's Lot, which is terrifying and kind of an ode to like a Lovecraft type story. And then you have Graveyard Shift, which is super creepy as well, about giant mutant killer rats. I love that story. You have The Last Rung on the Ladder, which is one of my top favorites, which isn't really a horror story. It's almost feels a little bit out of place in this collection. It's kind of just like about a sibling relationship. It's sort of like a tragic, kind of a sad story, but it always gets to me, and I've always just had like a soft spot for this one. I absolutely love The Last Rung on the Ladder. And yeah, there's a lot of other really great stories in this book. I first read this in my teens, and I reread it sometime a few years ago, and then I just reread it again this year. And I'll probably continue to reread it occasionally, or maybe just like my favorite stories from it every now and then. So yeah, Night Shift, I just wanted to mention that one. And then the other honorable mention is another classic book. This is my second time reading this. I first read this book back when I was like 16 or 17, I want to say. And I remember enjoying it, but I didn't remember much about the book, so I figured, it's been a while, it's time to give it a reread, and that is Dracula by Bram Stoker. And this book is truly a horror classic, unlike a certain other book that I talked about in my last video that was supposedly a horror classic. This book is really a horror classic. It's as good as everyone says it is, in my opinion. This is probably the best vampire novel ever written. It's not quite perfect. I give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. There's a few small issues I have with it. A couple things in the story that I wish were a little bit different. I feel like towards the end of the book, I feel like it loses its steam a little bit when the characters are hunting down Dracula. It seems a little bit too easy, too convenient for them. There's a lot of suspense early on in this book. Very, very suspenseful. I wish it would have maintained that level of suspense or had more of a climactic build up towards the end. Towards like the latter half of this book, it just feels a little bit like just too easy and convenient for our characters. It doesn't hang on to that suspense enough for me. Just a few minor issues I have with it, but overall, I absolutely love this book. I think it's one of the greatest horror novels ever written, and yeah, that's Dracula. Again, honorable mention because I've read this before, so I don't really feel like it's fair to count it. But now, moving on to my top favorite books of the year. Ones that I read for my first time this year. And we're going to be going in order from, I guess, least favorite to my most favorite ones. And the first one I'm going to talk about, I guess these first couple are kind of tied, so it doesn't really matter what order they're in. The first one I'm going to be talking about is from a Goosebumps knockoff series called Spine Tinglers, and that is Killer Computer. And this is a book that was actually sent to me by my good friend Austin over at Goosebumps Completionist. I'll link his channel down below. And he was the one that recommended this book to me, and he sent me this copy of it, and he was like, you got to read this book. And I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And I see why you wanted me to read this. This book is awesome. Now, it is a subgenre of horror that I'm typically not a huge fan of. It's kind of a little bit like techno horror. It's about this killer computer virus. You got this funny tagline up here. It says, "Careful, he bites," with a Y. But this is an extremely well-written book. The author who wrote this book, let me check to see his name again because I'm going to get it wrong. Bob Hirschfield, or Robert Hirschfield. This was his only contribution in the Spine Tingler series, and I don't understand why. I don't know why they didn't hire this guy to write more of these books. Maybe he just didn't want to. But this is the most well-written Goosebumps knockoff book I've ever read. It's just, it doesn't feel like the author in here is like talking down to you at all. It doesn't, insult the reader's intelligence. It's a very smart plot. It's got a good mystery to it. It's very suspenseful. It does have some pretty dark and violent moments in here too for a kid's book, but nothing too like edgy or over the top ridiculous like you would find in a Shivers book, where it feels like it's there just for the sake of being there for like shock value. This is just a very well-written book. I don't know what else to say about it. I really enjoyed this. This is my favorite Spine Tinglers book so far. I give it a solid 4 out of 5 stars. That's Killer Computer, book number 12 from Spine Tinglers. If you're curious about checking this series out, definitely give this one a read. This book is awesome. Next up is an R.L. Stine book. This is from the Nightmare Room series, and this was the last book I needed to read from this series. And I remember when I was finishing up reading through this series to do my ranking of it, I remember the last few books that I read were kind of mediocre, and I was just trying to get through it for the sake of getting through it so I could do my ranking. And this last book ended up surprising the hell out of me, and it's one of my favorites from the series. I think I put it in my number 3 spot, if I remember correctly, and that is Dear Diary, I'm Dead. This book is number 5 in the series. And I just ended up loving this book. I went into it with low expectations. I was starting to get a little bit burned out, like I said, on the Nightmare Room books. But this book was just awesome. Yeah, I don't know what to say about this one. This was just a fun book. It's basically about this kid that has this diary, I think, that starts predicting the future. It is kind of like a luck superstition type story. So if you're not a fan of those, you might not care for this book as much as I did. I tend to like those stories a little bit. Not sure why. It's just something I tend to like, I guess. So yeah, Dear Diary, I'm Dead. I also gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It ended up being one of my favorite books from the series. It has kind of a dark ending to it, kind of a dark ending with a little bit of ambiguity. The final chapter I wasn't a big fan of. It ends on a little bit too much ambiguity, I guess. There's some things unexplained. The last chapter doesn't really make a lot of sense. But that's really the only flaw that I have with this book. Other than that, I liked everything about it. So yeah, Dear Diary, I'm Dead comes in at number 4 on my list. Next up, I'm kind of cheating. I have 2 books in my number 3 spot. And that is Winnie the Pooh and The House at Pooh Corner. I know you guys, some of you might be wondering what the heck Winnie the Pooh is doing on this list. Let me explain. So, I have always been a Winnie the Pooh fan. You can make fun of me all you want or judge me. I don't really care. Winnie the Pooh is awesome. I've always been a fan of this franchise. I've loved the movies ever since I was a kid. I grew up watching them. Ton of nostalgia. Strangely, though, I don't think I've ever read the books, or if I have, it was a very long time ago when I was a kid, and I don't really remember them much. So this year, I decided to borrow the books from the library and read them all, which I did. And then afterwards, I went out and purchased the complete collection. Technically, there are 4 books in the Winnie the Pooh series. These are 2 of them. But the other 2 books are poetry books. And a lot of the poems don't even have to do anything with Winnie the Pooh, so I decided to just kind of leave those out. But this is the first book, Winnie the Pooh. And then this is the 4th, final book, The House at Pooh Corner. And I ended up really enjoying both of them. Probably more than any of the movie adaptations, honestly. These are children's classics for a reason. These are really good books. I absolutely love this franchise. Like I said, I gave both of them a solid 4 out of 5 stars. Not quite 5 out of 5. These books are essentially short story collections. There's different standalone stories in these books that have to do with Winnie the Pooh and the various characters of the 100 Acres Woods. And not all of the stories are amazing. There's a couple that I didn't care for quite as much, which I think is why I didn't quite give these 5 out of 5 stars. But yeah, I'm a huge Winnie the Pooh fan. my first time reading these books, at least to my knowledge this year. I ended up loving them both, and they made it to my top favorite books of the year. So yeah. Okay, next up, I'm going to be cheating again here. I got 2 books also in my number 2 spot. And these books I don't have physical copies of with me. I don't own these books yet. Eventually I'll get a nice set of hardcovers of these. But I just started reading through the Harry Potter series, and I decided to put both The Prisoner of Azkaban and The Sorcerer's Stone. I'll try to pop pictures somewhere up here on the screen. Decided to put these ones in my list because these ones are kind of tied for me. They both get like a 4 out of 5 stars, a high 4 out of 5 stars, or more like a 4.25 out of 5. Again, Harry Potter is another children's classic, hugely, like, very widely popular books. I'm sure you guys already know all about these. I don't have to go into much explanation about that. For some reason, I've never read them. I don't really know why. I've always loved the movies. I watched the movies since I was a kid. For some reason, growing up, I just never got around to reading the books. I don't know why. But this year, I finally decided to get to reading them, and they are very good. I'm enjoying them. So far, they're not quite as epic as I was hoping. I'm not like totally in love with them. I'm hoping as I continue to read through the series that I will start enjoying them more as the books progress and they get a little bit darker. And the later books are also much longer, so I'm sure there will be a lot more going on with them. These first 3 books are pretty short. They're all like 350 pages each, so they were very quick reads. And the reason I didn't include Chamber of Secrets, because that one I didn't enjoy quite as much. It was still good, but I just didn't enjoy it quite as much as these two. These 2 are tied as my favorites as of right now. That might change. I plan on reading Goblet of Fire very, very soon here. That is pretty much the next book up on my TBR after a couple other books I have on the way. I have to read those. But yeah, I'm excited to finally sit down and read through the Harry Potter series, and I'm enjoying it so far. And these books made it into my favorite books of the year. Okay, coming in at my favorite book of the year, by a small margin, I'll admit, I think I gave this one like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And that is a Roald Dahl book. Yet again, it's kind of a trend here of these famous children's authors that for some reason I never read when I was a kid, and I'm just now getting into them as an adult. I don't know why that's the case. It just is. Yeah, we have a Roald Dahl book here that I just read for the first time, and that is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And this book ended up being amazing, almost a perfect read. I'm not sure why I gave it a 4.5. I don't remember even disliking anything about it. I probably could just give this book a perfect 5 out of 5 stars, honestly. I absolutely love this book, even more than the movie. And I'm a huge fan of the original Willy Wonka movie with Gene Wilder that came out. When did that movie even come out? In the 70s, I think. I absolutely love that movie. It's might even possibly be like one of my favorite all-time movies. And just for the first time this year, I read the original book, and I think I like it even more. This book is awesome. Now, much like a lot of other Roald Dahl's books that I've read, his books are very mean-spirited. They're not as family-friendly and as cheery and charming as the movie adaptations tend to be. The books are a bit darker and more mean-spirited, and I think that's what I like about them. I kind of like that aspect. I like that they're not, holding back as much and trying to be like, rated G and too family friendly. Roald Dahl wasn't afraid to go a bit dark with his books, I guess. And yeah, I think that's why I liked it a little bit more. But yeah, this book, it's an absolute masterpiece. I don't know what to say about it. If you haven't read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I highly recommend it. I've read some of other Roald Dahl's books in recent times, over this year and last year. I've read The Witches, I've read The Twits, Fantastic Mr. Fox. Eventually I'll read through all of his books, but I don't think any of them will top this one as my favorite. This book, it's a classic. What can I say? It's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It does have a sequel too, called Charlie and the Glass Elevator, I think that's what it is. Eventually I'll have to read that too. I probably won't be as good as this one, but yeah. Alright guys, that is it. Those are my favorite books I read this year. If you've read any of them, let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I would have loved to hear your thoughts on them. And that's all I have for today, guys. Peace.